You could not sing that song in the Spirit unless you can believe the words of Jesus in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 24. No man can serve two masters, for either he will love the one and hate the other, or he will hold to one and despise the other. And yet therein has been the challenge for centuries, as far back as you can go even in biblical history. There are those who sought to serve God and Mammon, those who wanted to have the things of the world while trying to hold on to God. Israel tried it. When they came out of captivity, they longed for the leeks and the melons back in Egypt. They wanted to hold to God with one hand and hold to the world with the other. Balaam tried it. He wanted the riches that Balak had to offer, and at the same time somehow serve God. But you see how that turned out, don't you? Judas tried it. He thought he could betray the Lord and at the same time be pleasing to the Lord. And yet you found out how that turned out. That is a line of demarcation that has stood between God's people and the people of the world for centuries. It's a difference in who we place our trust in, who we love, and who we desire to serve. It's interesting when you look at this passage, this particular passage in Matthew 6 and verse 24, that it's not a passage that can be studied in isolation. You can get a lot of lessons out of it, but when you take it in the context and you look at what begins in verse 19 and runs all the way down through verse 34, the close of the chapter, I think what Jesus is saying to us, you cannot serve two masters. And I want to show you the consequences, Jesus says, of attempting to do that. So we're going to look at 6 things that deal with the attempt to either serve the wrong master or to serve two masters, because it will affect your faith and it will affect your relationship with God. I want to suggest to you, first of all, that if you try to serve God and Mammon, it will affect your value of Mammon itself. If you're holding fast to God, you understand that Mammon, money, material things, are simply tools to be used in our hands to the glory of God. But if I attempt to serve Mammon, then I become a part of the, well, we call it the rat race, and everything becomes important that is physical, and less becomes important that is in fact spiritual. And when you look at the role that the heart plays in this, start reading with verse 19. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon the earth, where moth and rust doth consume, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth consume, and where thieves do not break through and steal. For where thy treasure is, there will thy heart be also. There's an antithesis between loving God and loving Mammon. And the more you increase in love for God, the less you have a love for things of the world, and vice versa. The more you seek a love for the things of the world, the less your interest in God grows. And so it's a matter of choosing which direction that I want to go. I love the one and hate the other, or I hold fast to the one and I let go of the other. And yet when I look at these phrases and I see that where my treasure is, there my heart is, I think the reverse of that is true as well, that where your heart is, there will your treasure be. And there you will lay up true riches, or riches that are only temporary and simply not lasting. When I look at this passage, I also learn that it's saying to me that I am different than the world. There's something distinct about the child of God. He's sanctified. He's set apart. He's not like the world. He does not think like the world thinks. He thinks as God would have him to think. The world gathers treasures for this life. The child of God gathers treasures for the above. The world gathers treasures in a place where the hand of man can reach, but the child of God lays up treasures where the hand of man cannot reach, and where thieves cannot break through and steal, and where you cannot dig through and rob those things. The child of God gathers treasures for this world, the child for the next world, but the child of the world gathers things for this world. And so many passages stress that truth. When John wrote his first epistle in 1 John chapter 2, he said, love not the things of the world, love not the things of the world, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the vainglory of life, that's of the world and not of the Father. If I choose to serve Mammon, what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase my search for Mammon, and that's where the emphasis is going to lie. I am going to become totally consumed with the things that the world has to offer. Luke chapter 12, Jesus tells the parable of that rich man who built greater barns, and then he sat back and he said, take thine ease, eat and drink and be merry. That's what happens when we put the emphasis upon the physical things. Move down, if you will, to verse 22 and following, 21 and following. Because here I learn a second thing that the love of Mammon will do, and that is it will cause me to lose my focus. Read verse 21. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, your whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is the darkness? What Jesus is saying to us is, when I put my emphasis upon the material things, I lose focus as to what is really important. The eye is not a projector of light. The eye is a receptor of light. And the things that I see, the window is open to enter into my heart. And if I focus on material things, then the eye becomes dark instead of becoming more spiritual. If our God is Mammon, we're going to have a different world view than those whose God is Jehovah God. We sometimes hear phrases like, what is your worldview? That simply says, how do you view things in life? Do you look through the perspective of things that are temporary rather than things that are eternal? And yet when I look at that through the eyes of the world, it becomes a dog-eat-dog world. And the only thing that is important is how much I can consume in this life. It changes my focus. It changes my outlook on things. And there are several things that can do that. Prejudice can change my focus in life. Covetousness certainly has an effect on how I view things. And I'm back to the rich man in Luke chapter 12. He viewed things that were material as being the most important in this life. His focus was changed. How do you change your focus? How do you bring your focus in your life into line with God's will and keep it that way all the days of your life? Hear what the psalmist writer wrote in Psalm chapter 1. He said, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. And in that law doth he meditate day and night. And consequently he shall be like a tree that is planted by the rivers of water, that brings forth his fruit in its season. The psalmist writer was saying, what you meditate upon is what you become. In that law doth he meditate. He does more than just read it. He even does more than just study it. Having read it and having studied it and learning what it says, he then meditates on it, and his mind begins to change and come more in focus with the things that God considers important. We were studying in Romans chapter 12 this morning, and there the Apostle Paul said, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, and don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by what? The renewing of your mind. You think on things that are holy, things that are good. And thus Paul would write in Philippians chapter 3 that we're to think on those things that are good and honorable. And as I think on those things, my focus changes. My life comes more in balance with God's will. And I find myself holding closer to God and letting go of the things that are material. There's also the element that prayer plays in that. I pray that God would give me wisdom, that He would help me to maintain that balance, to keep my eyes on things that are spiritual and instead of things that are material. For the Apostle Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 in verse 17 and 18, the things that are seen, the things we see with our eyes, those are the things that are temporal. You ever thought about what that word temporal means? It simply means they don't last. And yet look how our world hoards things to themselves that simply don't last. The 1960s, we filled our attics up with material things. And when the attic got full, we backed out our $30,000 and $40,000 automobiles into the driveway, and we filled our garages up. When that wasn't enough, we started renting sheds and stuffing our sheds full of the things we could consume or the things we just could not stand to let go of. Where's the focus? Let me give you a third thing about making Mammon your God, or even trying to divide that allegiance. Number 3, it's going to cause you to be anxious. Look at verses 25 and following. Therefore I say unto you, be not anxious for your life, what you shall eat or what you shall drink, nor yet for your body what you shall put on. Is not the life more than the food, and the body than the raiment? Behold the birds of the heaven, that they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, and your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you of not much more value than they? And which of you, by being anxious, can add 1 cubit unto the measure of his life? And why are you anxious concerning raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you, that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God doth so clothe the grass of the field, which today is, and tomorrow is cast into the oven, shall he not much more clothe you, O ye of little faith? We live in a society today that is overly anxious. It's being played out on the scene of life. You're seeing it in politics in Washington. You're seeing it on Wall Street. You're seeing it with your next door neighbor. People are anxious about what the future holds. And the reason they're so anxious about what the future holds is they've lost sight of the one who holds the future, have they not? They've cast God out of their life, and consequently, there is no future to them. And even some members of the Lord's church get caught up in this rat race of anxiety and worry. We worry about the past, we worry about the future, we worry about the present, we worry about getting it, or we worry about losing it. We worry about our health, and yet Jesus said that in all that anxiety, you can't add 1 cubit to the measure of your life. Cubit is basically 18 inches. I don't think Jesus was saying you're not going to get any taller if you worry. He's using that to represent some advantageous advancement. And when I think about Jesus saying you can't add 1 cubit to your life, you cannot add another second to your life by worry. You can shorten your life. You're not going to add riches to your life by worry, but you will lessen those riches and blessings that God has for you. You're not going to make 1 hair turn black, but you're going to make a lot of hairs turn gray if you get caught up in anxiety. I want to show you 4 things that Jesus says about worry in this passage. And number 1, he tells me that it is useless. It accomplishes absolutely nothing. Second of all, he says it demonstrates a restricted outlook. I don't see the lilies. I don't look at the birds. I don't see God in heaven with the eye of faith. My vision has become restricted, and I've become myopic, spiritually speaking. But also I learned that there's the fact that I forget the providential watch care of God over his children. Wayne Jackson would say that providence is the unknowable known fact of God. By unknowable, he said it might be. There may be a chance. Even the Apostle Paul, when he sent Onesimus back to Philemon, he said maybe, perchance, it may be that he's going to be profitable to you. And yet when we look at our lives, every one of us, over the last 15, 20 years, or even longer, can you not see the hand of God's providence moving in your life? If God is your master, you can. But if Mammon is your master, you lose sight of God's care for you. And then here's a 4th reason. He said it's a demonstration of weak faith, or perhaps even no faith at all. There was a gentleman who lived in Tupelo, Oklahoma, my first work. He was a faithful member of the church, had been for years. He retired, and he decided he was going to build his house at some little plot of land outside the city, remote place. And one Wednesday night while he was at services, someone broke into his house under construction, robbed some of the lumber, took some of the supplies he had there, and when he got home, It cost him a lot in the pocketbook, didn't it? He started missing Wednesday nights to stay home and guard that house. It wasn't long till Sunday nights were being missed, and it wasn't long after he completed the house that he was not attending at all. He moved from making God the one who was his master to making Mammon his master, and he was so worried and anxious about those things that he lost sight of the true values. Let me give you a fourth thing that trying to hold to Mammon will do. It'll weaken our faith and even destroy it, as we mentioned in the previous point. That 30th verse, O ye of little faith. Lack of faith is really the root of worry anyway. It's the cause of worry. And the more faith we put in Mammon, the less faith we put in God. Imagine, if you will, the man who has labored for 10 or 15 years and he's managed to acquire maybe a sizable 401k or a retirement account. Maybe he's reached the 100,000 mark, and in his mind he says, if I can reach 200,000 in my retirement account, I'll be doing good. But when he reaches the 200,000 mark, what does he start thinking? If I can reach the 300,000 mark, if I can reach the 400,000 mark, and every dollar becomes something that you pursue, even to the detriment of one's own soul. Is it wrong to be rich? Absolutely not. Some of the great patriarchs were among the richest men in the world, and yet the difference is that those men recognized that material things were not the things that would save that individual. You could not redeem one's health. You could not redeem one's soul with material things. And so they kept those things in balance. And the more that I put my trust in things, the less I put my trust in God. Proverbs writer said in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 3 through 5, trust in the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. Lean not upon thine own understanding, but in all his ways, in all thy ways acknowledge him. And when I read that passage in Proverbs chapter 3, and I think about the heart of man, it's the intellect, it's the will, and it's the emotions. What was Solomon saying to us? You trust in God with all of your thinking. This is where you put your trust. This is where it begins, is in the mind and in the thinking. Then you put your trust in God with the heart and the emotions, and then you decide, you make a specific choice to put God in your mind and to guide your ways with the will. You surrender to him. Here's a man that's devoted to Mammon, and yet the more he strives for it, the more it fails, does it not? So instead of worrying, let us put our trust in God and realize that trying to serve Mammon and God will cause us to have divided allegiance, and it will just chew away at our faith and eventually completely destroy it. James Hastings shared this story with his readers, and it appears to be the reflections of an old country boy, and you're going to have to excuse me. I know our grammar teachers and those who are picky about the words they use, this may rub somewhat the wrong way. Here's what this country boy said. If you want to be cheerful, just set your mind on it and do it. Can't none of us help what traits we set out in life, but we can help what we end up with. When things first got to going wrong with me, I says, Lord, whatever comes, keep me from getting sour. And since then, I've made it a practice to put all my worries down in the bottom of my heart, then set the lid on it and smile. He has a right attitude, does he not? Trying to serve God and Mammon is going to cause our faith to weaken, which will in turn lead to more anxiety and more stress in our lives. I like the way the poet put it. There is an eye that never sleeps beneath the wing of night. There is an ear that never shuts when sink the beams of light. There is an arm that never tires when human strength gives way. There is a love that never fails when earthly loves decay. You try to serve God and Mammon, your faith is going to weaken. Let me give you a fifth point. If you try to serve God and Mammon, it's going to keep you from seeking the true things that are important. Look at verse 33. We've all memorized this verse. We sing a song containing the words in this verse. And here Jesus said, "But seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." I was privileged to sit at the feet of Roy Deaver when I went through school in 1972. And Roy had a common saying he would say with regard to seeking God. He said, if you have two choices in life, one of these is for yourself and one of these is to fulfill a responsibility that you have toward God, God always comes first and you always come second. It doesn't mean to neglect self, but it does mean to recognize the proper relationship that you have between God and yourself. And he is to be the one that we serve. If I let go of him and I strive to serve Mammon, I'm going to love him less, and the things that are truly important, the things that are lasting, will begin to fade away. The great physician says you want to quit worrying, you want to add balance to your life, you want to keep your life focused, you want to cease with all the anxiety, then seek God and his kingdom first. Search after his righteousness. And in view of the fact that the psalmist writer said that all the commandments of God are righteousness, Psalm 119, 172, it seems to me that I would want to cultivate a love for this truth, this word that he's given to me. Try to hold on to God and Mammon at the same time. You're going to lose sight of what's really important. You're going to be seeking things that are temporal instead of things that are eternal. And then last of all, if I try to serve God and Mammon together, it's going to give me a warped concept of time and opportunities. Look at the last verse in this chapter. Be not therefore anxious for the morrow shall care for itself. For the morrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. The great tragedy in the life of those trying to serve God and Mammon is they lose sight of time itself. Think about that rich man again. He thought that all of his possessions guaranteed him a little more time and he could lay by in store, for he thought he assured to himself he would see the next day. And yet what did Jesus say to that man in the parable? He said, "This night is thy soul required of thee." And who shall the things that he had collected, who shall those things be? He had a misconception of time and opportunity. We fall into that trap sometimes, thinking that we have all the time in the world. We hear the gospel and we think we still have tomorrow, we still have next year. I've heard so many souls over the years with whom I've studied who have said something to the effect, "I'll take care of it tomorrow. When I get my life straightened out, I'll take care of it then." And yet, before they can take care of it, death comes along and they have reached that time for the appointment unto which all men are headed. It causes us to have a misconception of time. And even the Hebrews writer said, today is the day of salvation. Not tomorrow, not the next day, not a week from now. Today is the day of salvation. I filed this little article away some years ago. The credit is given to a man by the name of Tom Norvell, and he has something to say about appreciating time. Let me share this with you. Driving around the city as the trees display their fall colors, I occasionally find myself wanting to pause and gaze at the brilliant colors. I'd like to stop my car in the middle of the road for just a minute to enjoy the leaves as they gently float to the ground. Something inside reminds me that if I don't stop now, they will be gone tomorrow. Leaves do not last long in the rain and the wind. I feel a sense of urgency about stopping, but I do not. Schedules, people traveling behind me, police officers who don't allow it, and so I settle for just a glimpse of God's beauty. A similar feeling comes over me when I look at my children. They change so quickly. They grow so fast. In what seems like only a moment, they go from being a little boy who wants to play ball to a grown man who wants to get on with his life. In a blink of an eye, she moved from a curly-haired little girl from her swing saying, "Push me, Daddy," to a developing young lady saying, "Don't push me, Dad, I'll be all right." There are times I'd like to slow things down and enjoy the view for a little longer, but life moves on, and I must settle for just a glimpse as they pass through my view. There are times when I feel so close to God that I'd like to stay and just stop the clock and stay in that setting. The sense of peace and power of His presence is comforting. I cannot imagine anything any better, but that time ends. Retreats end. The walk is over. The assembly disperses. Life interrupts. The peace is replaced with commotion. The tranquility is pushed aside by chaos, and so I settle for just a glimpse of what heaven will be like. There are times when I feel like I've finally figured out what this God-pleasing life is all about. I'm thinking the right things. I'm doing the right things. I'm becoming the right person. I began to think that I'm actually beginning to allow others to see Jesus living in me, and then I blow it. And I go back to my old ways, my old systems, my old devices. It was nice while it lasted, but I settle for just a glimpse of what it means to live like Jesus. There are many images that pass through our sight that are only there for a brief moment. If we take the time to take them in, and then we fail to enjoy them, they will be gone forever. Relationships, opportunities, experiences, all are there for our enjoyment and pleasure. Don't settle for just a glimpse. Take time, linger a little longer, drink deeply, be thankful, enjoy. The next time you notice a beautiful tree by the side of the road with the leaves swirling in the wind, check to make sure no one is behind you, and then pull off the side of the road and watch the leaves fall. Don't settle for just a glimpse. Isn't that what Jesus is telling us in that 34th verse? Be not anxious for the morrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. When I try to hold on to God and Mammon at the same time, I don't take time to enjoy life because I'm caught up in the pursuit of things, the pursuit of the material, the pursuit of self-satisfaction, the pursuit of self-fulfillment. But when God is my master, my life becomes a life that is service to others and becomes a blessing to others. So you see, there are a number of things that will result if we try to either make Mammon our God or even share that position with God, trying to make God and Mammon part of our life. And what God is saying to us is, I have to surrender all to Him. I have to give everything to Him and be willing to walk away from the things that God has blessed me with in order that I might serve Him more fully. Even if I attempt to serve two masters, it will rob me of the joy that God wants me to have. When it comes to God, what's the focus of your life? Apostle Paul put it this way. He said, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. For me to live is. For me to live is. Will you take those four words, for me to live is, those 5 words, and then after that, for me to live is what? For me to live is to get a greater bank account. For me to live is to reach retirement. For me to live is to go on vacation. For me to live is to enjoy my retirement. The Apostle Paul said, for me to live is Christ. That means Paul is telling us that for us to live is to surrender ourselves completely to Him. It begins with obeying the gospel, hearing what Jesus has to say, believing that He is the Son of God, acknowledging that in the presence of men, and then being buried with Him in that watery grave to arise and walk in newness of life. And yet if I am trying to serve God in Mammon, I will never hear the voice of Jesus, and it will be drowned out by the tinkling of the things of this world and the sounds of this world. Now take that word and fill it in again, that blank, and fill it again. For me to live is what? Do you want to be able to say, for me to live is mammon or riches? Or when this life is over, would you rather stand before God and be able to have said, for me to have lived is Christ. And that's a choice that you have to make right now as together we stand as we sing.